Coming up on the FSR Sarc Fighter podcast, an overall look at sarcoidosis from a recent study. The FSR Gala is coming up in Chicago, and I'm thinking about firing my doctor.
This is the Sarc Fighter podcast, living with sarcoidosis and other rare diseases. Here's your host, John Carlin.
Hi, this is episode 149 of the FSR Sarc Fighter podcast. I'm your host, John Carlin, and the date of this recording is October 20th, 2025. I do this podcast because I want to give you hope and context and perspective on this disease that so few people know about or understand, or if you are a patient, ever saw coming, right? So, a lot of people will email me and they will say, thank you so much for the podcast. I've been trying to figure out what's going on with me, what's going on with sarcoidosis. What is it? What's happening to me? How are other people dealing with it? Is my case any more unusual than anybody else's case in terms of all the difficulties that people go through with diagnosis and all the other stuff? You're going along with your regular life, and all of a sudden something's wrong, and then there's this long search, and someone in the medical community says, you have sarcoidosis, and you say, Sarco, what? And off you go into the wild blue yonder, dealing with this disease, searching for a good doctor, searching for explanations that may or may not come and may or may not be accurate. And unfortunately, that is the story of sarcoidosis. Maybe that's a lot more context and perspective than hope so far, I know, but I got to tell you, today I'm feeling a little frustrated. I have learned a lot in the 10 years since there was this unexplained tingling making its way from my feet up my legs, which turned out to be a mass or a granuloma on my spinal cord. I've gone from a miserable patient with active sarcoidosis to a patient with controlled sarcoidosis thanks to medication. And that's the reason for hope right there. There are, in fact, remedies that work, right? But in the meantime, I've started this podcast. I found FSR. I volunteered as a patient advocate, a member of the patient advisory committee, and of course, as the producer and host of the podcast. And as such, I've been given unbelievable access. I have interviewed the top experts in the field. I recently joined the board of directors at FSR, which I still can't believe. And all of that is to say that maybe as a patient, I'm a doctor's worst nightmare. What do I mean by that? Well, physicians hate Dr. Google, right? A patient comes in and immediately thinks they know more than the doctor does because they Googled their symptoms. And everybody's done that. You've done it for your kids. You've done it for an aging parent. You walk in and you say, well, I have learned thus and such, and I'm sure this is what I have. And the doctor bites his or her tongue and says, well, let's do some testing. Let me talk to you, da-da-da-da-da. It's hard not to do the Google thing. It's the first thing everybody does. So in a sense, that's me, but I'm 10 times worse because I haven't just Googled it. I've actually talked to all the experts. I've interviewed the CEOs and the researchers at pharma companies. I've had them explain sarcoidosis all the way down to the cellular level, right? We've really looked at it, and I've talked through it with a number of people. I've talked to all of you who are patients and have been given, we've gone through dozens and people have talked to me on the podcast who've gone through dozens and dozens of doctors. You're trying to find one who gets it and can help and has more than 3 other total sarcoidosis patients. And I went through a bit of frustration early on in my care, trying to find people that really knew what was going on with me. And I finally took my care to the Cleveland Clinic, where there's a sarcoidosis clinic. That's a 7-hour drive from my home, as you've probably heard me complain about, to see people who deal with Sarc patients all day long. And I have found that my care at Cleveland has been absolutely amazing. I have talked about it many times here on the podcast, and lo and behold, many patients have come on the podcast and they say, well, my doctor is Dr. Manny at the Cleveland Clinic. And I said, guess what? So is mine. And there are many, many good sarcoidosis clinics around the country. I just happen to have selected Cleveland. But my point is that there's a lot of local hospitals out there where the care is wonderful for your day in, day out stuff, and maybe even for some very, very severe stuff. But when you get into something that's super rare, like sarcoidosis, you might be better off going to a place where that's what they deal with. But if I have a serious flare-up or I need local care for some reason, well, I'm not going to get in my car and drive to Cleveland. It's just too far, right? That's the place I go for my annual checkups, and those doctors are kind of the people that schedule everything that's going on with me treatment-wise. But if something happens local, I'm going to a local hospital. So I need a doctor here in Virginia that will work as a part of a team with the folks in Cleveland. So let me just go through my list of doctors here in Roanoke. I had Dr. P, who retired shortly after I was diagnosed. He was a rheumatologist and was wonderful, but he retired. I then inherited Dr. B, also a rheumatologist, who told me there was no such thing as a world where I could have a doctor in Roanoke and doctors in Cleveland who would talk to each other. Great. Dr. B moved on. Dr. V comes in to replace Dr. B, and Dr. V says, thank God for Cleveland, because while I have a working understanding of sarcoidosis, I have never had to really treat anybody with sarcoidosis. So I'm so happy to be a part of your care team and that we can work together. Then Dr. V decides they want to go to a bigger hospital. So they move on. Then I have my most recent doctor who just sat down and pretty much started arguing with me as soon as we met. And one of the things that this doctor did not want to do was refill my prescriptions. They said, well, why don't you just get Cleveland to refill the prescriptions? And they said it kind of snotty, like. And I said, well, it's just the way it's evolved. Cleveland handles my Humira, and Cleveland handles another drug that I'm taking for sarcoidosis, but I also take a drug called gabapentin. A lot of you take it because of the neuropathy that I have, which causes a severe tingling in my legs and in my fingers, and gabapentin kind of shuts that down. It turns off the buzzing, as it were. But that's always been handled since it originated with a local doctor, and so that's what it is. But no one's ever really had a problem with that. It's just the way it's gone. Well, this doctor didn't want any part of that. She said, well, I guess I'll do it, but I don't understand. And then just wanted to fight with me over every little thing. Is that who you want for your doctor? And so I asked her, do you even want me as a patient? I said, you inherited me from another doctor. Do you even want my case? And she said something to the effect of, yes, because then I get credit for another patient, which I think translates into money. And I've got a lot of friends who are doctors who are not my caregivers, and I kind of want to find out what that's all about. But it wasn't the answer that I wanted to hear in that moment. So now I've got to decide if I want to fire this doctor and find another one. I don't want to be a problem patient. I'm not a problem patient. I have had for the most part, very, very good experiences with all of my doctors. But I want a doctor who's okay with being a part of a team, who understands also and can have a conversation with me at a certain level that I know more about my disease than the average patient. Not more than the doctor. I'm not saying I know more than the doctor, but I do recognize the trends. I have heard over and over what doctors say. I have heard other patients complain, and I kind of know what to expect. And so when I wanted to have a very honest conversation about sarcoidosis with this doctor, they didn't want to hear about it. They just didn't want to hear about it. So I just know the signs when something isn't right. So let's say I want to fire this doctor. Well, that's not easy, right? My doctors here in Roanoke have been rheumatologists, where in Cleveland I have a neurologist, Dr. Brandon Moss, by the way, who's been a guest on this podcast, and Dr. Manny Ribeiro, who's primarily a pulmonologist, but that's where most of the Sarc cases are, so he really knows sarcoidosis inside and out because he's treating pulmonology patients all day long, but he understands how to treat sarcoidosis. And these guys work together so well. I will set up my appointments. They have their staff arrange them so I can see the two doctors back to back on the same day, and prior to that have an MRI, so they're looking at my MRIs. They know me when I walk in. They know my wife's name, for crying out loud. They take the time to listen to me. They talk through all of my concerns, and that's the way it's supposed to be. So let me get back to Virginia. There's two hospital systems here in Roanoke. Both of them have fantastic reputations. But I have now quietly reached out to the other one where my current doctor does not work to see if there's some way I can change my provider. Now, that may ultimately be more trouble than it's worth because I've got this whole history of records, for instance, on my chart at the current Virginia hospital, and I don't know if that would transfer over to the new place. But I'm still just walking around day in, day out, reliving that conversation with that doctor and doing a slow burn. You know, like after you have like an argument with your boss or something, and it just didn't go well, and you just can't stop replaying the conversation in your head. That's where I'm at. Now, I'm probably only going to see this doctor one time a year, but I don't know if it's being worth being mad all the time and dreading having to go see her. And I'm sure she doesn't give it a second thought. Knowing her personality, I think she's probably just got a disagreeable personality, and she may have these types of conversations with lots of different people. And for her, this was just another day that ended in Y. And I was just another patient that ended in T. Okay? But I'm walking around doing the slow burn. So, do I want to go to the other hospital system and seek a whole new provider? I know a lot of people at that particular hospital. And if it can be arranged and it's not going to be a complete loss of all my data, I'm probably going to do it. Okay. I'll keep you posted on that. Hopefully that gives you some indication of how your doctor is doing with your treatment. All right. I hate to be the grumpy person, and thank you for listening to me. And yes, I'm complaining, but I hope I'm also giving you more of that context and perspective. Okay. That's my goal. And thank you so much for listening. All right, coming up in just a minute, I'll look at that study that I mentioned that shows us more about how often people with sarcoidosis have it in more than one part of their body.
I feel like a zombie, just feeding and stumbling.
Hi, I hope you're enjoying the Sarc Fighter podcast. You may be wondering, what can I do to help? How can I be a part of the sarcoidosis solution? It's simple. Make a donation to KISS, Kick In to Stop Sarcoidosis. 100% of the money goes to the Foundation for Sarcoidosis Research. Look for a link in the show notes of the Sarc Fighter podcast. Welcome back to the FSR Sarc Fighter podcast. I'm your host, John Carlin. No guest today, but some good information coming out from Sarcoidosis News. They're reporting on a new study that looks at, among other things, how often there are multiple organs involved for chronic patients or those who have long-term sarcoidosis. And this is a really good sense of perspective and context for you. So, in other words, how many organs are involved? Don't forget, your skin is considered an organ. So you can have it on your skin and in your lungs. So that would be 2-organ sarcoidosis involvement. You could have it on your spleen and in your eyes. You can have it in your lungs and just about anywhere. I'm very fortunate by comparison because I have it, well, now I say that. As far as I know, I only have it on my spinal cord, in my nervous system. And it has expanded one time, but it stayed on my spinal cord. I do think prior to my official diagnosis that I had a rash on my legs that lasted for months. And I now think that it was sarcoidosis. I never took it to a doctor because I just thought it was dry skin or whatever, and I didn't know to look for anything. So possibly there was 2, but that's actually long gone. So let's go with I have single organ involvement. But just so you know what we're talking about. So this is published in Sarcoidosis News, and it says the landscape of sarcoidosis is unclear. This is the title is Sarcoidosis, often a chronic disease that affects multiple organs according to a study, and it's by Andrea Lobo, PhD. The subheading here, patients at specialty centers have high rate of lung and heart problems. So the story starts out and they say sarcoidosis is, as you know, a chronic multi-organ disease for most patients receiving care in specialty centers, and it has the potential to become more severe over time, according to a large U.S. study. And again, I'm reading directly from this. Patients also had high rates of pulmonary fibrosis or lung scarring associated with worse lung function and of cardiac sarcoidosis when the disease affects the heart, data showed. And then there is a quote. It says, our data support the need for programs around prevention and treatment of pulmonary fibrosis and cardiac sarcoidosis and the development of long-term multidisciplinary management strategies, according to the researchers. And then, so this goes on, and it gives you a look at the entire landscape of sarcoidosis. So it's like the 20,000 feet looking down. Hey, there's this disease, sarcoidosis. This is what it looks like. It is an immune system activation, which leads to granulomas. And, you know, we've talked about this a lot on the podcast. And if you want to go back to my, what I call Sarcoidosis 101 episode, go back and listen to episode 2 with Dr. Simon Hart, where we sort of covered all of this. But the study found that the landscape of sarcoidosis in the United States, again, I'm reading, is unclear, which makes it difficult to optimize the allocation of healthcare resources, clinical care programs, and research activities for sites which specialize in sarcoidosis. Well, don't we know that, right? I mean, that's one of the things we talk about, some of the difficulties, some of the challenges. So with that in mind, the researchers evaluated the current clinical and socioeconomic status of people with sarcoidosis in the country. The study, dubbed Sarcoidosis Outcomes in All Respiratory Viral Infectious Diseases, included 2,034 patients living in 39 states, and they were recruited between 2020 and 2022. The mean age was 56.6 years. 53.8% were women. Most patients were white. 27.1% were black. That's not an ideal sample, in my opinion, because we know that African Americans are much more likely to have sarcoidosis. But be that as it may, that's what the study had to study, and so that's what they looked at. Very few of the people in the study had a history of smoking. There were a few who were current smokers, but most, I think this is interesting, most had at least one coexisting condition, nearly 70%, 68.1%. And obesity was the most common. So not coexisting sarcoidosis situations, but something else that was a contributing factor. And they said obesity was the most common, followed by high blood pressure, and then diabetes, and then past or present cancer. But by then you're getting, when you get down to cancer, you're looking at 16.4%. They said in 90% of the cases, the diagnosis came through both clinical features and a tissue biopsy, and the lungs were the most commonly affected organ, 76%, followed then by lymph nodes, a type of immune structure in the chest at 68.9%. So it goes on, talks about the involvement of skin, liver, spleen, bone marrow, heart, eyes, musculoskeletal symptoms, joints, and the central nervous system. Those were reported in up to 1/5 of the participants in the enrollment. And they did make the distinction that CNS, central nervous system, includes both the brain and the spinal cord. Now, I'm not going to go on any further because there's a lot more that you could read with this. And I just want to thank Sarcoidosis News for giving me permission to share some of their reporting, because I'm a news guy, and they have access to a lot of information I don't, and then they have writers like Andrea Lobo, PhD, who can distill it and put it out there in ways that everybody else can understand it. So, but I do think that is a read based upon what I hear from you guys when I'm looking at my emails. That is a read that you will enjoy, and I will put a link with the show notes or the description of this podcast. Okay? Also, coming up this week, in fact, tomorrow, I am flying to Chicago with my wife, Mary, on a sarcoidosis mission. This week is the annual Sarcoidosis Gala, which is an evening filled with presentations and honoring the people who are moving things forward in the treatment of Sarc, as well as those who are bringing recognition to the disease and helping with outreach to the patient community. The MC for the evening will be actress Gerald Prescott Galian, PhD, a champion for Sarc. She has had acting roles in The Walking Dead and All the Queen's Men and many more. And she has been a spokesperson for the FSR Ignore No More campaign and helped FSR in many, many other ways. I have met her before. She is beautiful and articulate and just all the things that, and she's also a PhD, by the way. But she is all the things that you rarely see in one person. When she speaks, she commands the room. And she's just stunning. So she is going to be the MC, and she's just wonderful. And I know that if she's running this show, it's going to be fantastic. So some of the other people who are going to be there, you may have heard of. Janet Makoviak, a Sarc patient, will be a guest speaker that night. She's appeared here on the podcast 2 times. Chasta Posey is a speaker who has also been on the podcast, I want to say also 2 times. Dr. Peter Sporn at Northwestern University is a speaker. He's been on the show. Many other clinicians and researchers will be in attendance, and many of them have been on the show or in discussion groups or different places where this podcast and they have touched one another. And of course, there are numerous pharma companies coming as well. So this guest list, if you will, is a who's who in the sarcoidosis space. And I've been asked to make a presentation to one of the awardees. And I've talked about this one other time. It's the Netflix series called No Good Deed. Have you seen it? Because a lot of people in the sarcoidosis space heard about it and then went and watched it. It's one of these series, and it's good. It's really good. But if you haven't, one of the characters on the show believes that he has sarcoidosis, And then that theme is carried all throughout the show. And it's one of the driving factors in some of that character's decision making, right? Well, I watched the whole series. I think you'll like it. It's very engaging. It keeps you guessing. It's entertaining. It's not a documentary on sarcoidosis or anything like that. It's very much a drama, but I do think you'll like it. So it's called No Good Deed, and it's on Netflix. And from our perspective, from the sarcoidosis perspective, what a great way to get the word out there, right? More and more people are hearing about sarcoidosis. And you hear that word, sarcoidosis. And I always say there's no such thing as bad publicity. I'm sure they didn't set out to give us publicity, but they chose sarcoidosis, and that's everybody leans in and said, what is it this guy's got? So more and more people are aware of our orphan disease, and that can lead to more research, more open doors, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. It's just one of those things that works in our favor. So my job at the gala will be to present to the showrunner and executive producer the FSR Innovative Media Impact Award. And I'm so excited. I mean, that is really, really cool. I've been going over, they sent me the introduction. I've been practicing, and I'll get to stand up there in front of all these people at this nice event in Chicago and present this award. So I am looking forward to that. Also in Chicago, while they have all of us FSR types there, they will have the board meeting, the FSR board meeting in person as opposed to Zoom, and that'll be my first in-person board meeting. And I am on a lot of local boards here in Roanoke, and during COVID or when you don't have time to get to the board meeting, you can almost always join via Zoom. But you don't get the same thing as talking to the people before and after the meeting, making eye contact with somebody, seeing if they agree with you, don't agree with you. If you're talking and you're making a point, you kind of want to see somebody nodding their head, right? And then you just want to be able to stand around afterward and have conversations, and that's when you really get to know people. So I'm looking forward to that and to meet many of the people that I've only talked to online over the years and meet them in person. And one person I'll just mention because she was on the air on the show just recently. Scarlett is the youngest Sarc patient I've ever met, and she's a freshman at Ohio State. If you remember back in episode 145, just a couple of episodes ago, she joined me and her mother, and Scarlett was at Ohio State in her brand new dorm room or apartment room. And her mom was in the kitchen at home. So one was at college, one was at home. And of course, I was here in Virginia. But she wants to be, she's got the grades and has the determination and sees herself as a pre-med student. So she wants to be a doctor, and we wish her all the best. But she emailed and said, yeah, are you going to be at the gala? Because I'm going to be there. So I'll get to meet Scarlett and her mom as well. So that's pretty cool. That means that there will be a lot that I can report back to you, hopefully in the next episode. I got to distill it all down. And I've also, just to let you know, I've been talking to another patient via email who has another rare manifestation of sarcoidosis. And this is one that I hadn't heard of. I don't want to get into it right now because it's a little bit complicated, but I am working to find a time when he can join me as well, and then we can sort it all out and walk our way through it. Okay. Hey, I just want to let you know this is a good time to contact me if you'd like to share your story on the podcast. I'm now booking people for November and December of 2025. Please reach out to me at carlinagency@gmail.com. Remember, the official Sarc Fighter song is called Zombie by Mark Steyer and his band, the White Hot Lizards. Mark's a fellow Sarc Fighter. We got an update from him in episode 118. I release this podcast every other Monday. As I'm speaking today, my trusty dog Dougal, my boxer, and Shandy, my adorable rescue mutt, had been in my office, but I think there's a squirrel in the backyard, so they have departed. But either way, they make my life so much better. The backstory to the founding of the Foundation for Sarcoidosis Research is episode 11 with Andrea and Redding Wilson. Please follow Sarc Fighter on social media, Facebook, Instagram, Peloton, and my cycling blog, Carlin the Cyclist, has some blogs under the category of cycling with sarcoidosis. As I mentioned earlier, if you're new here and you're just trying to figure out what's going on with sarcoidosis, that's episode 2 with Dr. Simon Hart. My story is episode 1. Please send me an email. Once again, it's in the show notes, carlinagency@gmail.com. Until next time, keep fighting.
Easier to grieve if I had a breath to breathe. I feel like a zombie, just feeding and stumbling. Learn to suffer, you feel pain someday. Learn endurance, your strength will fade away. Dead man walking, trying to keep up the pace. Dead man walking, counting down his days. And I don't know what will come. Look for silver linings, but still I find none. There was potential, slipping gone. It feels torrential, but I'm holding on. I'm holding on. I'm holding on to fear I fight every single night. Whoa, I'm still upright. Find a way to try and adapt your life. It's not the why, but the how that plagues my mind. A new perspective, appreciate what you've got. We're dead men walking, in an instant it could be gone. And I don't know what will come. Look for silver linings, but still I find none. There was potential, slipping gone. It feels torrential, but I'm holding on. I'm holding on. I'm holding on to fear I fight every single night. Whoa, I'm still upright. Wherever there is happiness, fight to be there too. And wherever there are friendly smiles, try hard to smile too. And wherever there is sunshine, don't let fear darken you. And whatever happens, please remember